Well, welcome to another day of the Paleo Cardiologist. At this point, we are on to chapter 4. So it says nutrition, where did we go wrong? So again, if you're new to this, Paleo Cardiologist by Dr. Jack Wolfson. Though many people at the clinic are doing a read through, and mostly I'm just commenting or quoting out of the book. But I want to go over a few things today. So when they talk about nutrition, some of these things most people know, but a lot of times I think it's important to reiterate the value of knowing why you eat the way you eat or why you should avoid certain things as well. So when I say that, so we're starting on page 42 here. They talk about, in the last year, we've had huge advances in agriculture and science and genetic modification in feeding world hunger. But, one of the things that is often misunderstood is that just because we can produce more food doesn't make all food equal. So this goes back to the point of being organic. So organic foods are shown to have less pesticide and herbicide and fungicide residues. Organic foods in general, when they're tested, tend to have higher nutrient loads. So, if somebody's starving, between starving or producing enough food, obviously make sure we produce enough food. At the same time, if you're able to realize that the food that you're selecting certainly helps to feed your body or fuel your body, look at your body like a machine. So, when they talk on page 43 about eating organic versus GMO, there are certainly more benefits to organic if you're able. And when we talked about this previously, keep in mind, where you want to spend organic first would be meats, followed by dairy, followed by everything else. One of the things that's unique or interesting on page 43 is when it talks about heart disease not having to be a top killer. In fact, when it talks about quite a few different societies ranging from everywhere in the South Pacific to Eskimos to certain parts of Africa or Australia, one 10-year study found in Greenland Eskimos that they didn't have a single death from cardiovascular disease, which is a good reminder that you don't have to have that be the top killer. But processing our foods is something that's very negatively affecting our health long term. So if you didn't know anything about nutrition, one easy way to eat healthier would be to eat non-processed foods, eat meats, eat vegetables and fruits and nuts and seeds and all that kind of stuff. Now, additionally, it goes on in page 44 to talk about once humans found sugar, medical problems skyrocketed. It also talks about how while eggs are found or searched for by all animals and the health benefits eggs, it talks about how really adult animals tend not to consume the milk from other animals. So grains, dairies, and sugars are things that can certainly be linked to more disease processes. One of the things on page 45 that it talks about is the so-called French paradox. So if you're not overly familiar, go ahead and type online, World Health Organization's healthiest countries. And you'll find often that France is in the top or possibly the top, depending on things. And so why is that a paradox? Well, the French are notorious for eating higher amounts of saturated fats than most other first world countries, yet they tend to have lower rates of cardiovascular disease. So we talked about earlier in these broadcasts how saturated fats are shown to raise HDL. They're shown to lower the bad LDL, but these are the healthy saturated fats: avocados, coconut oil, things from good sources. But additionally, now when they talk about hidden sugars, so if you look on the back of a label, often it doesn't just use the word sugar, even though they'll have high amounts of sugar. And so one simple thing is to look for OSE at the end, or O, so glucose, fructose. But OSE at the end is an indication of sugar. So there's a lot of hidden sugars in foods, especially processed foods. Now, sugar is probably the most addictive food type or food macro. like I said, it's according to this book and agreement in my belief, it's linked to a lot of the diseases that we deal with currently. On the bottom of page 47, talks about how hidden sugars trick the consumer. So, for instance, even something as simple as fruit juice. Actually, a client yesterday, when they were in for their adjustment, they talked about how they were telling a coworker about the negative effects of all the sugar that's in pop. Their colleague was having skin issues and their blood sugar was raised and they're having all sorts of issues. And so they agreed to quit consuming pop, and they brought what they thought was healthy. They brought tea, but it was sweetened tea, and it had nearly the exact same sugar load as the pop itself. So it might not have had some of the other negatives, but still, sugar is hidden in a lot of stuff. If you look at another thing to look at would be, for instance, like the amount of sugar in Starbucks. So you can see they hide sugar in a lot of different arenas. When you talk about having pumps of flavoring or something, those are often either filled with sugar or filled with, worse, the artificial sweeteners that go with them. Now, the last 2 points I want to make here for today. Number one is talking about, how come some people don't want to believe this? How come some people want to believe that, they should just, all foods are created equal, or processed foods have health benefits, or whatever it might be? There's an Upton Sinclair quote on page 48. It says, "It's hard to get a person to understand something when his job depends on not understanding it." And one of the best examples of this that I've ever seen would go back to something as simple as Lunchables. Now, if I remember having Lunchables as a child, if you don't know what a Lunchable is, just type it in. But most of you can just immediately imagine a Lunchable. Now, a Lunchable typically has a stack of white flour crackers, a version of some sort of cheap meat, often American style cheese. It's a very processed cheese, and then after you eat that, healthy part, then there's some sort of dessert or treat in there. Now, if you believe that this is a healthy food, that's up to you. But ultimately, when you look at that, most people know that a Lunchable is like a nice side benefit or something for, it's easy to pack. It has a long shelf life. But Lunchables, the last time I looked, the American Diabetes Association still had Lunchables as a acceptable food for diabetic children. And if you look into it in more detail, you'll find that Oscar Mayer is a major donor to the American Diabetes Association. So you have to make the decision for yourself. Do you think that somebody independently decided that these Lunchables that have all the things that skyrocket your blood sugar is healthy for diabetics? Or do you think the fact that there's an influx of money and donations is why it's recommended? It's a $500 million food the last time that I personally looked for Oscar Mayer. So, the other example of that would be cereal. If you see that Heart Healthy stamp on cereals, often it wasn't independently given to that company. It was a purchase thing for a very large dollar amount. So when you see that, Cheerios prevent heart disease or lower cholesterol, you may want to do a little bit of research. Does this make sense? Now, the last page we're talking about here, when we're talking about pages 49 and 50, it says on page 49, studies show diabetics are at a 3-fold risk of heart disease, cancer, and dementia. So if you're diabetic, if your body's unable to control your blood sugar, you have a 3 times greater risk of developing the top 2 killers, and possibly, in my opinion, the worst thing that could happen, which would be to forget your day-to-day activities, to forget your loved ones. And even being pre-diabetic, so somebody that's not on medication but has lower regulation of their blood sugars has a 60% increased risk of dying from heart disease. So why is it so important to keep sugar and refined carbohydrates out of your diet? They are one of the top things that causes disease and death in the body. So keep that in mind as you make these decisions. The book also goes on to state in that same page, meat, seafood, nuts, seeds, and eggs do not or minimally raise blood sugar. But yet, if you eat even whole wheat bread, you can watch many people's blood sugar skyrocket. So get rid of those refined things, eat whole foods, you make and avoid sugar, you're going to make a significant impact. Yet whole foods have way less of the advertising on them for their health benefits. It's typically the processed foods that advertise the health benefits. Do not be fooled. Eat whole foods. You're so much better off. So if you've enjoyed this so far, again, for those that are clients, we are giving away complimentary books. We went through the first 150. We have another 100 ordered. I saw yesterday the shipping confirmation, so they should be in next week. But you can reply to this thread. Please share or comment, and have a great rest of your day. See ya.